Earth had been under galactic quarantine for nearly 200 years. Humans were considered wildly unpredictable and dangerous by the United Planets. Some in the galactic community had argued over the decades for full military invasion and eradication of the human threat, while others cautioned restraint. In the end, the wisest leaders realized that any conflict with humanity could prove ruinous and proposed strict isolation of the quarantined planet. Enormous warning beacons were constructed in stable orbits of Earth's star system, declaring in all major languages, "Quarantine notice. Extreme caution is advised. Violating ships will not be tolerated." For the most part, the system worked. Humanity was cut off but still thrived with its immense population and advanced technologies. Life went on across the four quadrants of the Milky Way, and no one gave much thought to the strange race of bipeds isolated around an unremarkable G-type star in the Orion Spur. That is, until the Zalek invited themselves to the galactic stage. The Zalek were bipedal biproprietal beings with ochre skin that possessed 4 arms in total. They were highly intelligent and socially structured in an aggressive military hierarchy. Their empire spanned at least 24 star systems towards the Garan Nebula. When diplomatic delegations approached their borders, the Zalek subjugated them immediately. Some races were simply dominated and turned into caste workers, while others were eradicated completely. In only 12 galactic years, the Zalek became the gravest threat encountered in millennia. Their swift raider ships, powered by antimatter drives, could reduce enemy cruisers to molten fragments. They deployed orbiting rail weapon platforms capable of exchanging relativistic blows with planet-based powers. Billions were already enslaved or slain as the Zalek onslaught plunged deep into the Milky Way. In desperation, an emergency session was called by the United Planets leadership aboard the Trilon Citadel space station. Esteemed delegates and observers, Nella, the Trilon secretary, announced in her buzzing native speech translated instantly into all languages of those present, "We now face possible extinction. The Zalek surge has proven uncontainable by all conventional forces. Their technological capabilities seem without equal." A murmur of fear passed through the gathered politicians and military commanders. The walls of the spherical meeting chamber shimmered with representations of the increasingly dire tactical situation display across hundreds of afflicted systems. There can be only one recourse remaining to guarantee our survival as civilized species. We must revoke the long-held quarantine against the Terrans. Deafening argument broke out. The human delegation had not been invited in nearly 180 solar orbits, and the mention of that off-limits world instantly evoked instinctual feelings of dread and suspicion. What little was known about human behavior did not engender trust or optimism. While some of their cultural accomplishments could be acknowledged, the overall assessment pegged Earth's dominant species as off-the-scale aggressive. Lord Gran, the 4-armed, 3-headed chief fleet commander of the UP, Guard cut through the noise with his amplified vox tones. "Delegates, please. We now must dispassionately examine the facts. The Zalek threat far exceeds anything in living memory. Most dreadnought-grade warships have been neutralized, and our fleets cannot match their prowess with exotic odd-numbered space and zero-point energy missiles. Planetary shields can be overwhelmed. We know the humans at least match Zalek power projection capabilities." "They may well exceed them," shouted the Tyrol representative. "That is why the quarantine exists." "What then is your solution?" Captain Zellner Gran snapped back. "The time may have come to fight fire with fire. We know humans have perversely endured every obstacle attempted against their system. They cannot be reasoned with nor induced to meaningful diplomacy. But the enemy of one's enemy can perhaps be rallied on a strictly martial footing. The human, penchant for adversity and conflict, may now serve our shared interests in eliminating an existential threat to all galactic civilizations." The argument boiled over again, but the idea of using human aggression as a weapon began to take hold among the exhausted leadership. No other options remained on the table. If Earth could not be recruited to form a military alliance, then the long-feared terminal sanction may have to be imposed before the Zalek scourge arrived at the home system worlds. Nella conferred with the chamber elders, then tapped her oral proboscis on the empathy crystal, broadcasting silence. She cleared her vocal orifice and declared, A delegation will be immediately dispatched to the prohibited Sol system. They will bypass all previous barriers and directly link open communications with the human planet, should diplomacy overwhelmingly fail. All ships are ordered to retreat and activate latency fail-safes before reaching minimum safe distance at the Oort cloud perimeter. This ruling council will not tolerate human expansion beyond specified borders upon pain of total system eradication via induced solar destabilization. But if their will for self-preservation can be appealed to, weapon and warship technologies may be bartered for their engagement against the Zalek. The observation units will monitor all events very closely. There will be no margin for error if Terrans seize upon undue opportunities for exploitation. May sanity prevail. The order flashed to all corners of United Planets control. Across habitats, ring worlds, planetoids, and home systems, all sapients felt tangible dread of the Hail Mary plan to unleash human fury against a rapacious enemy, hoping it would not bend boomerang catastrophically upon themselves. But the choice had been made in the face of extinction. Deal with Earth's mad warrior race. A dozen sleek cruisers materialized in synchronous solar orbit 5 million kilometers above Earth's North Pole, using the magnetic field to hide their arrival from most detectors. Telemetry registered over 20,000 artificial satellites now circling the azure world, along with constructs the size of asteroids in various libration pathways. Flying habitats, orbital farms, shipyards, and weaponized platforms bristled around nearly every orbital zone. The planet gleamed dazzlingly with city growth encompassing all land masses. The sharp-eyed leader of the contact squadron, Captain Kalzor, ordered PSYOPS filters set to maximum on board all vessels. His mission was diplomatic, but military options may need split-second readiness. Their deflector fields could withstand probable attacks for 15 minutes before cascade failure. Hopefully that would buy enough time for both sides to rethink rash judgments once the newcomers' friendly intentions were made clear. But with humans, one could never discount treachery masking even behind obvious gestures of goodwill. Helm, adjust heading plus 2 degrees positive inclination and increase acceleration to 0.1 Gs. Open tight beam hailing frequencies towards Tranquility Base installation and broadcast first contact package. Beneath the moon's battered surface, Randolph Stuyvesant floated in the 0G nexus of the Farside Deep Radar Array. One of 50 men stationed for a 3-month rotation, Randy found the secluded duty restorative. After his combat tours against drug lords in Colombia and fanatics in Uzbekistan, he welcomed the sensory deprivation of regolith sheltered life. The pay wasn't bad to babysit antique blob scanners either, just in case some long-shot ET whisper ever reached through light years of darkness. Of course, everyone knew the real action was out there around gas giants and asteroids, building up forces to confront whoever eventually showed up outside the 100-known AO perimeter. Ever since the big quarantine, the Space Force mantra became eyes outward. Should contact resume? The policy wonks speculated about everything from relief aid requests to invasions when alien receptions committees popped in. Randy figured he would pull garrison duty on Ceres or Titan when that party started. In the meantime, his rotation at Farside Base was multiple targets. All sectors report activation. The steely voice of Colonel Pierce crackled on network loops. A second later, every screen lit with positional updates from L3 and 5 orbital platforms. Energy spikes indicated relativity scale exhaust trails and optical arrays focused on the wavering streaks of fusion efflux. There was no mistaking it. Ships had arrived inside the belt and were braking hard. Randy's pulse raced and he spun his pod towards the Bay module. This was no drill. Back inside Trilon Station, the United Planets leadership witnessed humanity's response with shock verging on panic. The contact squadron blared emergency signals as targeting locks surrounded them with deep radar, LiDAR, and gravitic scans. They had come uncloaked in good faith, but antimatter drives now spun up on Fortress-scale battle wagons. Swarming attack drones filled space in the millions, answered by emerging rows of immense rail cannon turrets. Fearing immediate destruction, Captain Kalzor ordered total press blackout. Down below, Blue Zone Alpha alert sirens wailed for the first time in Solar Alliance history across all continental plates. Entire populations correctly understood that interstellar civilizations had appeared overhead for whatever purposes. Social nets roiled with patriotic fury and swirling rumors of alien intent. Armed service branches surged to DEFCON 2, just beneath outright attack commencement. President Victor Boyd monitored the crisis from the National Underground Command Center buried beneath a mountain 2,200 feet east of Washington, D.C. His third term brought unprecedented expansion of space defense economies, and now a lifetime of dire speculation might emerge with a single wrong decision. He would play this gambit to the ultimate degree, knowing the Zalek could be literally arriving next if humanity failed the next test against its will. Bring them down. Grav anchors fired a nanosecond before terawatt tractor emitters seized all ships and dragged them toward the planet. Collision avoidance routines struggled to keep the convulsing craft intact through uncontrolled atmospheric entry. 5,000 miles above the North Atlantic Ocean, neutral buoyancy was restored by density compensators moments before ejection sequences automatically activated. Crew modules shot free of disintegrating hulls as escape pods peppered across the sky to be collected by aircraft. One cruiser named Deliverance suffered a punctured antimatter storage chamber and exploded brilliantly, sparing its crew but emphasizing that human defenses took zero chances. 7 intact and 2 seriously injured commanders rescued so far were hustled towards the Capitol hub off Chesapeake Bay. Marine guards secured passageways but allowed free movement as the delegation was ushered into an executive greeting lounge. Head of State Victor Boyd soon entered briskly without aides or security to stand peering at the newcomers with intense curiosity. For their part, the rattled UP officers were astounded that initial negotiations would begin unconventionally one-on-one. "I will be direct," the president began. "Your arrival here violates 2 centuries of clearly posted restrictions. The only reasons weapons are powered down is because you obviously come in haste for some purpose. Speak it plainly, then we determine what happens next." Captain Calzor steadied his 3 lung sets and answered carefully. "Greetings of peaceful intention from the United Planets of over 1,000. A dismissive raised hand halted his speech. "We don't care," Boyd stated flatly. The UP condemned all Terrans as criminally unfit for civilized membership according to your own accords and charters. So what brings you now across forbidden zones of entry? There could be no more pretense. We come to beg emergency military assistance. Our very survival depends on aid against an existential threat from the rapacious Zalek incursion. All efforts to restrain their advances have failed utterly. They possess weapons and drives rivaling your abilities. We cannot withstand them alone." The human regarded Calzor for a dozen heartbeats before responding. "And if we refuse?" Sweat glistened on 4 armpits in the alien heat. Political lives and a myriad unborn futures balanced precariously on the next delicate moments. The captain spread all 4 palms helplessly. "Then the Zalek may seize total hegemony and aim hungered sights towards your own domain, or the UP may attempt sanctions including system immolation, an outcome my people cannot accept despite facing otherwise certain obliteration." Now Boyd allowed himself the slightest grin. "Understood, Captain. Your candor is appreciated since we monitored your arrival in real time. Indeed, my own family generations prepared for exactly this opportunity. You state plainly that mighty United Planet civilizations face annihilation by invaders you cannot defeat. Therefore, quite desperately, you come begging aid from we unfit humans." He stepped closer to Calzor with storm-gray eyes drilling into the alien's mammalian-style pupils. Fearful sweat redoubled, but there came no intimidating pheromones or involuntary endocrine triggers from this unfathomable creature. Perhaps there was still hope if basic self-preservation overrode other human emotions. Victor Boyd had not instantly dismissed the plea, nor threatened them as yet. "Earth stands ready to discuss limited military collaboration against your Zalek enemies, but mutual exchanges of technology will occur only under Terran authority supervision. We will require communication access to your highest leadership immediately and repeatedly during action. Any suspicion of deception or efforts to exploit the situation will cause instant termination of assistance. These are the initial conditions. Do you accept, Captain?" The clock is ticking. There was no hesitation possible. "Yes, Mr. President." On behalf of all United Planets members, and by authority of Secretary Nella and Overcommander Gron, I pledge cooperation with your terms." Victor Boyd clapped once sharply. Aides entered bearing document pouches. "Very good. Let's get straight to business then." Turning aside briefly, he gave a final order to his Star Force chief watching remotely. "Admiral Scott, implement Case Zulu. We're going hunting." Zalek Imperator Zahn watched plunging attack pods vaporize kilometer-thick city domes with contemptuous ease. These Darloids scarcely deserved eradication since token orbital defenses shattered so quickly. He would allow some number to live as slave processors. This system's rich veins of carbonaceous minerals suited intense exploitation. His today construction by the docile natives would please Overmarshal Verac. Imperator. Extreme anomalies detected from Quadrant 6 bearing down at high relativistic factor. Clarify, he demanded, swiveling eye shrouds towards the sensor master. Conquering the Darloid's central world took priority over some nearby space phenomenon. Gravimetric distortions increasing off scale, consistent with macro-scale wormhole ingress. Multiple exotic energy profiles. The deck shuddered as alarms shrieked. Outside, blackness itself prowled free of furious electromagnetic discharges and curved nightmarishly towards the Zalek assault fleet. Zahn scaled imagery to the faint ghostly outline of a titanic vessel decelerating with impossible force. Magnification resolved a predatory shape studded with vast barrel ports, swing wings bristling with torpedo clusters and swarms of attack drones, detaching like angry insects defending their hive. Words found no purchase in his speech membranes. Never could the Imperator have imagined such a Leviathan existed even in theoretical extrapolations. The sensors reported barely controlled singularities swirling inside a hull kilometers long, harnessing the power of chained quantum spacetime. What species or cold intellect had fashioned this star-born abomination? Death poured towards him at relativistic velocity. Zahn's communications channel crackled with panicked reports of similar raging beasts vomiting out of rifting tunnels across the advanced battle zone. Like sharks to blood, some evil sapients had followed the glorious Zalek to catastrophically intervene. There was only time for a single verification pulse to Overmarshal Verac before flames and death claimed everything aboard the righteous Praetor. In his final moments, Imperator Zahn railed vainly against cruel misfortune and fate to so favor his people to this point, only to permit such an unimaginable menace to suddenly appear. Perhaps fate truly was alien after all. The Zalek incursion forces were barely 4 solar days in frantic retreat when United Planets leadership convened the Emergency Security Conference. Captain Calzor rendered testimony from the still safe Trilon capital, though Zalek marauders ranged less than 3 light-years away. Everyone put aside turbulent feelings upon learning of humanity's unleashed fury. Estimates suggested at least 40 Zalek capital ships and 60 battle stations had been eliminated by long-range hyperflux torpedoes from the nightmarish Terran craft dubbed displacers. Direct exchange between Overcommander Gron and Admiral Scott were tense but courteous. Humans were not forthcoming about the spectacular technology but demonstrated good faith participating alongside UP. Were elements in joint harassment maneuvers. The Zalek simply could not stand before the displacer juggernauts, and continuing engagement whittled their numbers daily. Although no one openly suggested it yet, prominent voices wondered if termination sanctions might still remain the final option once Earth's forces completed their offensive. High Monitor Krell summed up the confidential discussion. Esteemed delegates, surely we must table ultimate judgments until the present crisis concludes. Our guest, the allowed term for human military, operates under treaty constraints not to advance beyond declared buffer volumes. Suspicion admittedly persists over true capabilities but should not blind us to their intercession on our behalf. If extinction awaited, would we not have unleashed any option available despite misgivings? Over half the Zalek accursed armadas have been confirmed destroyed. The remainder are in full chaotic retreat towards their own space. It seems humanity determined not to win our war but end it swiftly, limiting engagements only to hostile vectors near former borders. Such restraint was wholly unexpected. If trends continue, total eradication of the Zalek may be averted. We must revisit all considerations about Earth and Terrans in new light, if appreciation for the preservation of life itself outweighs darker misgivings. I move that unprecedented sanctuary clauses be drafted as starting conditions for this greater, shared understanding. The measure passed by acclamation saved 2 abstentions. Similar debate raged behind myriad planetary councils and species hive minds across the endangered length and breadth of galactic civilization. Life continued where only certain death reigned days before. However unwelcome the human savagery, it was recognized as deliberate, controlled, and above all prevented the extinction of countless worlds. In the coming months, the Zalek forces were decimated and withdrew completely back to their home systems. Though suspicions lingered, the leaders of the United Planets ultimately extended a permanent sanctuary invitation to humanity in gratitude for their actions defeating the existential threat. An embassy was cautiously established on neutral ground where humans and aliens could begin normalizing relations. In time, bonds slowly strengthened, perceptions softened, and humanity took its first measured steps onto the galactic stage, not in conflict but cooperation. There was still much progress needed, but for now the future looked brighter between races. The risk had paid off. Earth was no longer forced into isolation, and perhaps one day humans would finally take their full place among the peaceable United Planets, their fierce unpredictability tempered, but still lending strength to all.